Welcome. Today, we're going to take a walk through some of the world's great cities, but we're going off the beaten path. We're here to uncover the hidden blueprints of how some of their most famous neighborhoods were really built. It's a story of struggle, of incredible resilience, and, transformation. So, let's get started.
This question right here, it's the key to everything we're going to talk about today. It's what unlocks this whole story of how a simple, kind of cold economic need for labor can, almost by accident, create these permanent, totally vibrant communities full of life.
Okay, so before we hit the streets on our tour, let's just get on the same page. When we say ethnic enclave, we're not talking about just a random bunch of people living near each other. No, these are highly organized social and economic worlds, often built from the ground up, usually under some pretty intense pressure.
All right, our first tour is all about neighborhoods that were born from this powerful economic magnet, that huge post-war demand for labor in Europe. We're literally going to follow the path from the factory gates right into the heart of these new communities.
First stop, Southall, London. The whole story of what eventually became Little Punjab starts right here, at a place called the R. Wolf Rubber Factory. See, the manager had served with Sikh soldiers in the war, and he remembered how disciplined they were. So he specifically recruited them to fix his factory's labor crisis. That one personal connection, that was the spark.
And by 1960, the community just exploded. 1,000 men. But, that number doesn't tell the whole story. We're talking about a pretty harsh reality. Like 20 men crammed into a single house, sharing beds in shifts. One guy gets out of bed to go to the night shift, another guy hops in. This intense shared hardship, it created these incredibly deep bonds, and that solidarity would be absolutely essential for what came next. And this right here is the crucial part. This community absolutely refused to just be a source of cheap labor. No way. They organized. They created the Indian Workers Association to fight for their rights. They went on strike to demand equal pay. They literally stood up and fought back against racist attacks. This isn't just a timeline, it's the story of a community demanding to be seen not as temporary workers, but as citizens.
Now, just a few miles away in London, a very similar story was unfolding. You have the Windrush generation, Caribbean migrants who were invited to help rebuild Britain. They came with the full promise of citizenship, but their welcome, it was anything but warm. Many were first put up in these leftover deep air raid shelters. I mean, what a grim way to start a new life.
And they immediately ran up against something called the color bar, just systemic discrimination that locked them out of good housing and decent jobs. But here's the thing, they didn't just take it, they built their own world. They created these underground bars, their own social clubs. They basically built all the institutions that the city refused to provide for them. They built a community that could rely on itself. Okay, now let's hop over to Berlin, a similar story, but with a fascinating policy twist. See, West Germany had this official plan called the rotation principle. The idea was that Turkish guest workers would come for 2 years and then go home, like a revolving door of labor. But German companies hated it. They didn't want the cost and hassle of constantly retraining new people, so they pushed back hard, and that whole temporary plan just fell apart.
And because that policy failed, you see the direct rise of what people started calling Little Istanbul. Turkish families put down roots in Kreuzberg, a neighborhood that was literally walled off from the rest of the city. And they built this unique, self-sustaining world right there in the shadow of the Berlin Wall.
So, if we take one thing away from this first tour, it's this idea right here. A factory job might be the magnet that pulls people to a new city. Sure. But it's the community, the social bonds, the families who follow. That's the glue. That's what makes people stay and turn a room in a boarding house into a real home.
Okay, let's move on to our second tour. Now we're looking at a totally different kind of blueprint. These communities weren't formed by the pull of jobs, but by the traumatic push of war and displacement. These are incredible stories of building a world, literally, from nothing.
I mean, just think about that question. It's the fundamental challenge. You've lost everything, and now you have to become a powerful political voice for your own survival. You can't just go find a job. You have to fight for the actual ground to stand on, the space to rebuild your life.
Our first stop here is Chittaranjan Park in Delhi. After the traumatic partition of India, displaced Bengalis felt like the government was just ignoring them. So what do? They organized. They formed the East Pakistan Displaced Persons Association and started this massive campaign to lobby for land. This neighborhood literally exists today only because they refused to be invisible.
And check out what their victory got them. This was not prime real estate. It was a remote,
rocky, completely inhospitable piece of land with nothing on it. The city basically gave them a wasteland that nobody else wanted. But, and this is just incredible, through sheer force of will, the community took that wasteland and transformed it. They brought in water, electricity, they built homes, and they created what's now known as Mini Kolkata. It's one of Delhi's most vibrant and sought-after cultural centers today. Just an unbelievable transformation.
All right, let's head over to Sydney. After the fall of Saigon, a wave of Vietnamese refugees were drawn to a neighborhood called Cabramatta. Why? Cheap housing and factory jobs. But they faced so much prejudice. The neighborhood was stigmatized in the media as a center for crime, nicknamed the Drug Express.
And what happened next perfectly shows this three-stage journey that so many refugee communities go on. First, it's just about survival. Find a place to live, find a job. Second, it's resistance. You build up those internal support networks to push back against the stigma. And then, the third step, this is the real game changer, professionalization. The children of those first refugees, now they're doctors and lawyers and business owners, and they come back to reinvest in the community, revitalizing it from the inside out.
So, after this whirlwind tour through all these incredible communities, what can we take away? What have we really learned about the blueprints that build our cities?
Well, we've basically seen two different paths, right? You have the industrial anchor, which is pulled in by the magnet of jobs and then has to fight like hell for permanent status. And then you have the resilient ghetto, which is pushed out by a crisis and has to fight for the very space to exist. But look at the response in both cases. It's organized, it's active, and it's always driven by the community itself. And really, that's the final takeaway here. These enclaves are not passive places where new people just happen to land. Not at all. They are actively built worlds. The people who live there didn't just find a little corner in the city. They fundamentally reshaped it. They changed its economy, its culture, its very streets.
And you know, this history isn't just in London or Berlin or Delhi, it's everywhere. It's in all of our cities. And it kind of invites us to look at our own neighborhoods with fresh eyes, to walk around and ask, what blueprints, what amazing stories of struggle and creation are hidden just below the surface of the streets, right where I live?